This is chapter 2 of Elephant in a Garden. You might want to you'll need to grab a sheet of paper or your notebook and something to write with. There will be places in the reading today that I will stop and I'll ask you to jot down some of your thinking. If you were in class with us, this will be a place where we stopped and you turned and talked to your partner. Chapter 2. Lizzie paused for a moment or two, then smiled across at me sympathetically, knowingly. No, you're too busy for this, dear. I can see that, she said. You gotta get on. You have other patients to look after. I know this. I was a sort of nurse once. Nurses are always busy, but I can talk to Carl. I can tell him my elephant story. There was no way I was going to miss her story now. If Carl was going to hear it, then I was too. And the truth was that I had already sensed from the tone in her voice that she was making nothing up, that Carl had been right about her. You certainly can't stop now, I told her. I'm off duty at 12, and that's just about now, so I'm on my own time. And we want to know all about the elephant, don't we, Mum? Said Carl. Then you shall, Carly. I think from now on I shall call you Carly, like my little brother. So it will be as if you are inside the story. She lay her head back on her pillows. I have had quite a long life, and quite a lot has happened, so it might take a little while. You're going to have to be patient. I think, to begin with, you have to know the names and places. I was called Elizabeth then, or Lisbeth, some people called me. I became Lizzie much later. Mother, we always called Muddy, and I had a little brother, as I have told you, about 8 years younger than me, little Carly. He was always full of questions, endless questions, and when we answered, there'd always be another question about the answer we just given. Yes, but why, he would ask. How come? What for? In the end, we would often become impatient with him and just tell him it was for a blue reason. He seemed happy with that. I don't know why. Carly was born with one leg shorter than the other, so we had to carry him a lot, but he was always cheerful. In fact, he was the clown in the family, kept us all laughing. He loved to juggle. He could do it with his eyes closed, too. The elephant loved to watch him. It was as if she were hypnotized. The elephant was called Marlene. Muddy got to name her because she was working with elephants in the zoo. She named her after a singer she loved, that many people loved in those days, Marlene Dietrich. I wonder if you might have heard of her. No, I don't suppose you have. She's been dead a long time now. She was very slim and elegant and blonde, too, not at all like an elephant. But that did not seem to matter to Muddy. She called the elephant Marlene, and that was that. We had a gramophone at home, a wind-up one with a big trumpet. You don't see them like this anymore, only in antique shops. And so Marlene Dietrich's voice was always on in the house. We grew up with that voice. She had a voice like dark red velvet. When she sang, it was as if she was singing only for me. I tried to sing just like her, mostly in the bath, because my singing sounded better in the bath. I remember Muddy would sometimes hum along with her songs when we were listening to them. It was like a kind of duet. But what about the elephant? Carl interrupted again, not troubling much to hide his impatience. I mean, how come this elephant was in your garden in the first place? Where were you living? I don't understand. Yes, you are right, dear, she said. I was getting ahead of myself, rushing too quickly. She thought long and hard, collecting her thoughts before beginning again. It would be better, perhaps, if I start again, I think. The story should always start at the beginning. No, my own beginning would be a good start, I suppose. And so this is a part in the book, and we're going to start seeing this happening in several of the chapters where there's going to be this movement from time. So we'll start like in the present day, like in this chapter with Lizzie being an old lady, and then she'll shift back in time, like back in the past, to where she was 16 and where she's younger and when the story takes place. And this is one of those times where now we're going to flash back to the past. So I was born on the 9th of February, 1929 in Dresden, in Germany. We lived in quite a big house, a walled garden in the back with a sand pit and a swing. And we had a woodshed where there lived the biggest spiders in the whole world, I promise you. There were many high trees, beech trees, where the pigeons cooed in the summer right outside my bedroom window. At the end of the garden was a rusty iron gate with huge squeaking hinges. This gate led out to a big park. So in a way we had two gardens, you might say. A little one that was ours, and a big one we had to share with everyone else in Dresden. Dresden was a wonderful city then, so beautiful you cannot imagine. I only have to close my eyes and I can see it again, just as it was. Pappy, this is what we called our father, Pappy worked in the city art gallery restoring paintings, and he wrote books about paintings too, about Rembrandt in particular. He loved Rembrandt above all other artists. Like Muddy, he loved listening to the gramophone, but he preferred Bach to Marlene Dietrich. He loved boating best of all, though, and fishing too, even more than Rembrandt or Bach. On weekends, we would often go boating on the lake in the park, and in summer we would take a picnic and the gramophone with us, and we would have a picnic by the shore, a musical picnic. Poppy loved musical picnics. Well, we all did. Every holiday we would take a bus into the countryside to stay with Uncle Manfred and Aunt Lottie on their farm. Aunt Lottie was Muddy's sister, you understand. We would feed the animals and have more picnics. Pappy built a treehouse for us on an island out in the middle of the lake, which was more like a large pond than a lake when I come to think about it, and it was all fringed. It was fringed all around with reeds, I remember. And there were always ducks and moorhens and frogs and tadpoles and little darting fish. We had a small rowboat to get across the island and plenty of trout to fish for in the stream that ran down into the little lake, so Pappy was happy. Sometimes when the harvesting was done, we'd all be out there in the field of stubble long into the evening, gathering the last grains of golden corn. And whenever we could on summer nights, Carly and I would sleep up in the treehouse on the island. We would lie awake listening for the gramophone playing far away in the farmhouse, to the owls calling one another. We would watch the moon sailing through the clouds. We loved the animals, of course. Little Carly loved the pigs especially, and Uncle Manfred's horse, Tommy, he was called. Carly would go riding on Tommy with Uncle Manfred every day around the farm, and I would go bicycling on my own. I went out for hours on end. I loved freewheeling down a hill, the wind in my face. It was our dream time, full of sunshine and laughter, but dreams do not last, do they? And sometimes they turn into nightmares. Stop here and write down something that you're thinking or something that you're wondering. I was born before the war, of course, but when I say that, it sounds as if I knew there was going to be a war all the time I was growing up. It was not like that, not at all, not for me. Yes, there was talk of it, and there were many uniforms and flags in the streets, lots of bands marching up and down. Carly loved all that. He loved to march along with them, even if the other boys used to taunt him. He was so small and frail and suffered greatly from asthma. They called him Pegleg because of his limp, and I hated them for that. I would shout at them whenever I was brave enough, that is. It was not only the mockery in their faces and the cruelty of their words that I hated so much, it was the injustice. It wasn't Carl's fault he had been born like that, but Carly did not want me to stand up for him. He used to get quite angry at me for making such a fuss. I do not think he minded them nearly as much as I did. I think I've always had a strong sense of justice, of fair play, of what is right and what is wrong. Maybe it's just natural for children to be born like this. Maybe I got it from Muddy, who knows? Anyway, I always recognized injustice when I saw it, and I felt it deeply, and believe you me, there was plenty of it in those days. I saw the Jews in the street with their yellow stars sewn in their coats. I saw their shops with the Star of David daubed in paint all over the windows. Several times I saw them beaten up by Nazi stormtroopers and left to lie in the gutter. At home, Poppy didn't like us to talk about any of this, about anything political. He was very strict about that. We all knew that the terrible things the Nazis were doing, but Poppy always told me that our home should be an oasis of peace and harmony for us in a troubled world, and that it only made Muddy angry or sad, or both, to talk about it, and that little Carly was far too young to understand about such things. Besides, Pappy would say, you never know who's listening. Stop here and write down something that you're thinking or something that you're wondering. But down on the farm, on our holidays, one summer, the summer of 1938, it was, Muddy and Poppy, Uncle Manfred, and Lottie got into a long and heated argument. It was late at night, and Carly and I were already upstairs in bed, but we heard every word of it. Uncle Manfred was banging the table, and I could hear the tears of anger in his voice. Germany needs strong leadership, he was saying. Without our Fuhrer, without Adolf Hitler, the country will go to the dogs. Like Hitler himself, I fought in the trenches. We were comrades in arms. My only brother was killed in the war, and most of my friends. Is all that sacrifice to be for nothing? I remember the humiliation of defeat and how people starved in the streets after the war. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Make no mistake, it was the government in Berlin and the Jews who betrayed the fatherland and the army, and now Hitler is restoring our pride and putting things right. I had never in my life imagined Uncle Manfred could be this angry. Muddy was furious too and called him ein Dummkopf. In English, this means a fool or a fathead. She was saying that Hitler was a madman, that the Nazi regime was the worst thing that had ever happened to Germany, that we had many dear friends who were Jews, and that if Hitler went on the way he was going, he would lead us all into another war. Uncle Manfred, who was ranting now, and quite beside himself replied that he hoped there would be a war, so that this time we could show the world that Germany had to be respected. Then, to my utter surprise, mild-mannered Aunt Lottie joined in, calling Muddy nothing but a coward and a lousy Jew-loving pacifist. Muddy told her in no uncertain terms that she was proud to be a pacifist and she would be a pacifist till the day she died. Through all this, Pappy was doing his best to calm things down and said that we were entitled to our own opinion and that we were all family, all German, that we should stick together, whatever our views. No one was listening to him. The argument raged on for most of the night. To be honest, at that time, I didn't understand much of what they were talking about, only enough to know that I was on Muddy's side. Carly understood even less, but we were both so upset and surprised to hear them being so angry with one another and shouting like that. When I think about it now, I realize I should have been more knowledgeable about what they were saying, but I wasn't, not then. I was just a teenage girl growing up, I suppose. Yes, I hated all the dreadful things I'd seen the stormtroopers doing in the streets, but the truth is, and I'm ashamed of this now, that I was far more interested in boys and bicycles than in politics, and more in bicycles than boys, I have to say. I do not think I understood just how serious the argument had really been till the next morning. When Carly and I came downstairs into the kitchen for breakfast, Muddy had all of the cases packed. She was in tears, and Pappy announced grim-faced to Carly and me that we were going home. He said that Uncle Manfred and Aunt Lottie had decided we were no longer welcome in their house and that we wouldn't be seeing them or speaking to them ever again. Uncle Manfred and Aunt Lottie were nowhere to be seen. I shall never forget walking away down the road from the farm, knowing we'd never be coming back. Carly started crying, and very soon I found myself doing the same. It felt like the end of a wonderful dream, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. Only a year or so later, Pappy came home one day in his gray army uniform and told us they were sending him to France. It came as a total surprise to me. That was how the war began for us. The beginning of our nightmare, of everyone's nightmare. That's the end of the chapter, so go ahead and write down something that you're thinking or something that you're wondering.